Everyone. I'm Anju Baraya. I'm joined with my colleagues Jesse and Seraphe. We'll be facilitating your session. Speaker for tonight's session is Marsha Acker. She's going to walk us through her Agile journey and provide the Agile tracks. Marsha is an executive leadership and team coach with over 20 years of experience designing and facilitating organizational change initiatives. She's the author of the book, The Art and Science of Facilitation. Marsha founded Team Catapult, a coaching and change leadership firm in 2005. She's a track founder for IC Agile, team coaching track and enterprise coaching track. She comes with tons of knowledge and tons of certification. Certified professional facilitator coach, certified professional coactive coach, professional certified coach, and so on. So I'll welcome Marsha to take the floor.
Thank you. It's nice to be here. And I am truly inspired by all the stories that we were just sharing a few minutes ago. So it's great. All right, well, I do have some slides, but they're gonna be mostly pictures. So I'm gonna share my slides. And just wanna welcome you. For those on the tech panel, can you just tell me whether you can see that screen?
Yes, we can, and there's a little gray square in the middle.
There's a what?
A gray square in the middle.
Okay.
It looks like it's getting smaller.
Great. Let me stop that for just a second.
Few things regarding logistics till the time Marsha figures out. So please do us Q&A session, posting your comments and asking questions. And Marsha would like to answer the questions towards the end of the session.
Yep. Okay. So I use Zoom every single day of my life in 2020, and I'm not sure. Ah, there we go. Okay, is that better?
The gray box is still there.
The gray, okay. Great. Okay, so how about now?
It's all gone.
Perfect.
All right, awesome. Okay, so yeah, welcome everybody, and it's nice to be with you tonight. So I want to start off by telling you a little bit about my leadership journey. And 20 years ago, if you had asked me this question, what kind of leader do you want to be? I think I would have probably laughed out loud at you. And then I would have said, I don't know. I'm not sure what you want me to say or how you want me to answer that question. So this whole journey for me with Agile has been highly informed by the manifesto, and my education was actually in software and decision support systems. And I'm endlessly grateful for this journey that I've had. And today I have come to understand through firsthand experience just how much the vision for the Agile Manifesto has set us up as a community, and that to live those values of being agile and leading change requires clear and purposeful intention setting. And it asks each of us to step into our own leadership journey. So this question, like what kind of leader do you want to be, is asking each of us, like, how do we want to show up? What's the intention that we want to set? So I invite leaders, I think about how I want to show up in my home, how I want to invite others to collaborate, how I interact with clients, how I show up for meetings to talk about mundane operational administrative tasks. It really informs everything that I think about. So as we're here to celebrate this 20th anniversary of Agile, I'm going to invite you to journal along with me this evening. So you might make notes like, when did you first get introduced to Agile? What is your intention? What is the leader? What kind of leader do you want to be? And just make notes as I talk a little bit tonight about what that looks like for me. And I'm going to share. So there was a book written by Don Miguel Ruiz, and he says your words are magic, and they matter. And he explains that you can use your words for white magic to create good in the world, or as black magic to create chaos and spread negativity. And I like to think of it as energy, or like my energy or emotions are how I show up. And whether I'm feeling fearful or bad or angry, upset, or I'm not really integrity with my true self. And then my words can disrupt or hurt. And if I'm coming from a place of joy and love and abundance, then I'm coming from this place of white magic. So several years ago, I was leading a coaching and facilitation cohort, and I had just finished watching the movie Divergent. So if any of you have ever seen that series, and the movie really spoke to me because it had me thinking about this divergence in group process and how we need divergence in order to create difference and in order to access collective intelligence. And so I was really focused on this word of divergence, and I checked in with that intention in this cohort. And my one takeaway from that call in that moment was how my words created a really different experience. So in that moment, the technology stopped working, the call went sideways, the conversation went a little bit sideways, and I will never again tempt fate because I didn't really intend for it to be quite as divergent as it was. And I never doubted from that moment forward, it was one of my biggest lessons, is that the notion of our words really matter in terms of how we show up. So I recently wrote in my book, The Art and Science of Facilitation, that how we think is how we lead.
Marsha?
Yeah.
Oh, it just went away right when I interrupted you. I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
The green box is back.
Yeah, no problem. But how we think is how we lead, and when our values are in line with how we're showing up in the interactions that we're working in, we can feel really at integrity with it. And when we're not in alignment with our values, it's where things get kind of off track. It's where we feel dissonance, and our ability to use our emotions as a guidance system for how we adjust and how we change in that particular moment. I'm having all kinds of technical difficulties tonight. So
I see that gray box.
I am not seeing a gray box, but let me,
So, Marsha, I think you are sharing a presentation rather than desktop. So whatever comes up on top of the presentation that blocks the screen, which comes up here as a gray box.
Got it. I wonder if, let me try something. Thanks everybody for. That's not the presentation. Does that make it any better though?
There's nothing in the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's
the box is not there as of now.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
there is nothing on the way, but just so we know, there is a black box right over there towards the, yep, it's gone now. There was something towards the right top corner, but now it's gone. But yeah, that's good.
I'm so confused. Okay. So, so you don't see any more black boxes or gray boxes?
Nope, you're good. You're good. If we see it again, we will let you know. But
okay.
oh,
okay.
there it is. It's gone.
It must, I'm wondering if is it the Zoom? Is it the black Zoom bar? Sorry, okay.
But perhaps that's a Zoom bar, yeah.
Ah.
Because I think that's what it is. Yes, yeah, yeah, that's what it
Okay,
is.
okay,
Mm-hmm.
all right, fantastic. So, um, all right, so yeah, so I was sharing a little bit about this notion of aligning our values with our intention and how we, truly set intentions around being agile. So, thinking about one of the things that has been the most important for me in this journey has been that if words are magic and mindset influences how we think and how we lead, then being really clear about my intention seems really important. So in his book, Seat of the Soul, Gary Zukav talks about the power of intention. And he says, every thought and feeling is motivated by an intention. And that intention is a cause that exists as one with an effect. And if we participate in the cause, it's not possible for us to not participate in the effect. And in this most profound way, we are held responsible for our every action, thought, and feeling, which is to say for our every intention. So it's why leaders are responsible for our intent and our impact. And if you've ever given someone feedback and they said, well, that wasn't really my intent, we can't just own part of the equation and not the other part. So we have to own all parts of it, both the intent and the impact. So when I step into a room to facilitate or coach a team, my first question to the team is always, what do you want the outcome of this to be? And then how do you want to contribute to it? And how do you want to be in the room when things go sideways or they get different? So it's really all about, how do we show up and set the intention? And in this essence of intention, it sets the energy for all of our interactions and everything that we're doing in that moment. So the third law of physics states that for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. So in other words, it's the impact that we have, and we have the ability to have this kind of ripple impact when we're working with others. I think that the manifesto, not sure. I think that the manifesto is this beautifully stated, simple intention. And it says we are uncovering better ways of developing software by doing it and helping others do it. And so through this work, we have come to value the following. And I think that it's this concept that a manifesto 20 years ago really set forward by a group of smart individuals that wanted to come together and collaborate for a higher purpose. They set an intention, and just look at the intention setting and the impact that it's had. So the challenge with intention setting is that it can be a little bit difficult to understand, like, how does all of this fit together? So some of the words that came out of the manifesto that really resonated for me were things like collaborate and trust others and respond to change, self-organizing, sure, yes. Conversation is a way to effectively communicate. Those words really resonated with me. And then the next question that came was, but how? So at the time, I was a linear thinker. I wanted to see everything happen in a step-by-step guide. I even had a nickname of the process chick at the time. So my story in the manifesto really started to inspire different ways of how, like, what that might look like and what could that look like in action. And it resonated with me because by 2001, I had been working with a team and we had been experimenting with extreme programming since '99. And I just started to see something in Agile that was far beyond development practices. In 1994, 5 years earlier, I had come to the world of professional facilitation, and it was the first time I had my eyes open to the power really of group process and how focusing on content, allowing the group to focus on content And for me to focus on process and how people were working together, how it just opened things up, and it changed the way that I show up and lead in any kind of conversation. So by 99, I'd been practicing facilitation for about 5 years. And I desperately wanted developers and project managers and graphic artists to see the power of facilitation. But it was, you know, at that time, it was kind of labeled soft skills and not a lot of appetite for it. So, but what the Agile Manifesto was doing was introducing this notion of behaviors into the concept of development. So we had this values and interactions in collaboration, this value around how we work. And I saw Agile in the manifesto as beginning to bridge this process-oriented, like, here's what we need to do, with the people side of how are we going to do it. I think it's easy to say things like, let's collaborate. But some of the more difficult parts of Agile were in, well, how do you do that? If any of us, myself included, have been part of such collaborations that didn't go well. So if you've been part of that, you know it's not necessarily easy. It doesn't just happen. It takes intentionality, and it takes different ways of looking at it. So at that moment, I had this dream that I'd get to be part of this thing that was coming to fruition. We'd been working in the development space for a while, and I wanted to be the one that was going to go out. I saw it as a bridge to people, and I wanted to be the one who was going to go out and start to teach people how to do it. And little did I know at the time how little I knew about myself and working with human interactions. My unconscious incompetence was off the charts. And as I reflected, I've spent the last week really reflecting back on the last 20 years, and I'm humbled today by how little I knew, and potentially how much more I have to learn. But I'm really grateful for my learnings and the self-awareness. And I see the Agile movement as being one of my greatest teachers in striving for some of those values that it set forward, because it made it okay to talk about humans and interactions with engineers and managers. So I'm grateful today that we can talk about that and that there is this human side of it. So one of my very first Agile gratitudes is to make it okay to talk about humans and interactions. And thinking about all the gifts that has given. And it's this gratitude that leaves me with this first intention that I set early on, which is I'm the kind of leader who bridges the human being and the technical side so that all voices can be heard. So I'm going to ask you to think about what your statement is, but I want to share a few others that I have with you. This gratitude leads me to a different story, which is at the same time that I was experimenting with Agile, I was also promoted to the director of operations for the company that I was working with. And a few weeks into that role, the CEO came and sat down with me in my office, and he said, you know, I'm not so sure that you're cut out for this role. I don't think that you have the gravitas to be a leader here. And went home that night, and I was angry, deflated, confused. I didn't, at the moment, I was like, and what does that even mean? And what would that look like? And I'm not even sure what that feedback is supposed to be about. But it was my first moment of having feedback that said, I don't think you're the leader that we're looking for. And what I can tell you now that I couldn't have told you then, I didn't have the words to tell you then, is that there are actually 3 communication domains that we all speak in: power, affect, and meaning. And there is often one that we use predominantly more than we use the other 2. So one that we tend to use more, 2 that we tend to use less, and one that we can tend to have a bias against. And the feedback about gravitas was actually his way of saying that when I spoke in affect, it didn't resonate. And he spoke more predominantly in power. And so it can feel like we're just talking past one another, even if we're saying the same thing. So as months passed, I began to really doubt and question my ability to lead. So his words were in my head constantly, every day. And I would, they were really weighing me down, but I would hear this voice going, you know, maybe you're not cut out for this, or maybe you're not really a leader. And I was so deeply impacted by, you know, having that story in my head. But what was also happening was in that company at the time, we were struggling to make payroll every week. And the Monday morning management conversations were about who are we going to lay off this week? And there was no part of those conversations that I enjoyed. I would imagine that nobody enjoyed them. And at some point, I reached, I guess, the moment where I just said, you know what, I don't know how else to show up other than as who I am. And what was really important to me at that moment is that I cared greatly about the people that were working with us. And I wanted to bring that voice, that language into those meetings. And while profitability and business productivity and measures were super important, we also needed to take into consideration the impact it was having on others. So I've never subscribed to the, it's not business, it's personal, or it's not personal, it's business. And so I just contributed to those conversations, and I continued to be the voice of, hey, what's the impact this is going to have? Because we need all three of these communication domains, power, affect, and meaning, in our conversation. I've learned to bring more range in my communications. What he was really asking for was, hey, bring more power, less affect. But just like there's no one model in agility for what leadership looks like, there's no one model for necessarily how we communicate. So we continued as a company in turmoil for about 6 months. And then it was at the end of a very long day. And he came back in my office and sat down once again. And he said, you know, a few months ago, do you remember what I said to you? And I said, yep, I do. And he said, you know what? I was wrong. He said, you have everything that you need to be here and to be a leader. And I got that wrong. So one of my gratitudes in this journey is for the gratitude of humility and the willingness of a leader to come forward and say, I was wrong. And I felt like that is one of the first times that that was ever modeled for me. And somebody had the courage to say it. And I strive daily in my own leadership to find the courage to say it to others when it's true for me. So I have another Agile gratitude that I have is for growing leadership range and being able to work with difference. I have a deep appreciation for what leadership can look like, and it looks different on everybody. And I think we need all kinds of leaders. We need to be able to welcome different voices, different opinions, and that it can look leaderful and it can be leaderful. Just because it's different doesn't mean that it needs to be excluded. That led me to a statement of, I am the kind of leader who brings range in my leadership so that others can show up as their full selves. In her book, Big Magic, Elizabeth Gilbert wrote something really profound. And I want to read you an excerpt. I want to read you a passage from that. And it's about intention setting and choosing when to say yes and when to say no. And so I'm going to read this real quick. So she says, I believe that our planet is inhabited by not only animals and plants and bacteria and viruses, I think we know that, but also by ideas. And ideas are disembodied, energetic life forms. They are completely separate from us, but capable of interacting with us, albeit strangely. Ideas have no material body, but they do have a consciousness, and they most certainly have will. And ideas are driven by a single impulse to be made manifest. And the only way an idea can be made manifest in our world is through collaboration with a human partner. And it's only through the human's efforts that an idea can be escorted out of the ether and into the realm of the actual. Therefore, ideas spend eternity swimming around us, searching for available and willing human partners. And when an idea thinks it's found somebody, it'll say potentially you might be able to bring it into the world. The idea will pay you a visit. And the idea will try to wave you down until it finally realizes that maybe you're oblivious to the message, and then it moves on to someone else. But sometimes, rarely but magnificently, there comes a day when you're open and relaxed to actually receiving something, and you will start to notice all sorts of signs pointing you towards the idea. The idea will wake you up in the middle of the night and distract you from your daily work. I don't know about you, but I have had many ideas visit me. And I have said no to some, and I have said yes to many. But I want to tell you a story of one where I said yes. In 2005, I started Team Catapult, and in 2010, I met Ahmed Sidki. And we connected around his work for Agile transformations and shared a common passion about mindset and the role that it plays in Agile transformation. And he talked a lot about being Agile, not just doing Agile. And that particular perspective really resonated with me. And this is one of those big magic ideas. This is when one of those ideas visited me. In 2011, Ahmed and I decided to collaborate on creating a set of learning objectives for teaching facilitation skills to Agile coaches. And about that same time, the International Consortium for Agile was just getting off the ground. And this was going to be one of the first sets of learning objectives that IC Agile would publish as Creative Commons. As he and I sat down to map out the learning path, we kept running into this idea that facilitation and coaching sure did share some of the same foundational mindsets and competencies. And so we wondered, could we define facilitation and the learning objectives for facilitation without defining the learning objectives for coaching? And just a year prior, Lisa had just released her book, Coaching Agile Teams. And I said to Ahmed one day, I was like, you know, it seems a little silly to sit down and write learning objectives when there's this book that's just been published. And it seems like maybe we should call her. And he said, well, let's do that. And so we did. And after a brief conversation with Lisa and Michael, they both said yes, Michael Spade. And they wanted to become and do part of that work. So in May 2011, the four of us met for the first time in Reston, Virginia. And at that time, there was very little clarity around the profession and the discipline of Agile coaching. And we quickly aligned on a very common passion of wanting to contribute something to the community that would be of value. And even though Agile had brought about the opportunity to talk about this human side of the equation, it was relatively undefined about what it would look like. Lisa's book was certainly charting brand new territory, but there was a lot of gap between, well, what does it look like and how do you become that? Like, what are the competencies? What's a learning journey? And what should you know? So we pondered many things during those conversations. We wrote many index cards and flip charts and scratch paper. And we pondered things like the fields of professional facilitation and how deep should we go, and the field of professional coaching and what would that look like, and should they be aligned or should we go deep, or should it be really separate from those professional fields? And where would someone start? And will anybody care or want any part of this learning journey? But we knew we wanted to create something with handholds, kind of guides, about the personal work that was needed to help equip Agile coaches to do this kind of work with teams. And we set an intention also to remove our personal agendas from the conversation and really come together to create something for the community. We accomplished that so well that both the Agile coaching class and the Agile team facilitation class did not pass their accreditation the first time that we went through. So we had done such a good job at removing ourselves from the equation that we had created something that we had to redesign even our own work towards. So 2 years after our initial meeting, the Agile coaching track launched in 2013. And we set some very clear intentions as part of that track. And it came out in the very draft preamble to that track. And it said, Agile coaches bring their whole self to the work, weaving together technical skills from professional facilitation, coaching, mentoring, and teaching. And they do this in service to teams to cause change, navigate conflict, intervene, and guide teams towards joyful high performance. And to operate at each step, there is increasing level of skill, gravitas, there's that word again, and scope and influence expected. Today, there are over 17,000 Agile facilitation certifications, 19,000 Agile coaching certs, 80 certified experts in Agile coaching, 100 member training organizations, and Agile coaching is being taught in 126 countries. I am grateful for collaborations. I have an immense gratitude for the process and the product that gets created when you collaborate with people and you access collective intelligence. And you'll know when you have collective intelligence because you'll be able to look at something and say, I have no idea who contributed what, we created that. And you can't find any one particular person's thoughts because new thinking emerged in the process of creating it. It took us 2 years to launch that first track. And I am grateful for all the conversations that grew me personally, but that have even continued to grow me. And we were worried back then that we potentially were setting the bar too high. I don't think, so the numbers that I pulled from IC Agile this week, and I'll be honest, I hadn't really looked at the numbers. And it's kind of amazing that that's the impact that it's had. So from this experience came another intention that I set, which is I am the kind of leader who grows other leaders and creates space for collective intelligence. When your parent, aunt, uncle ask you to describe Agile, what do you say to them? I think of Agile as a movement, and I think it's difficult to summarize. And I think that is something else that I'm grateful for. I'm going to try to play this real quick. Not sure how it's going to work, given my current luck with screen sharing today, but we're going to give it a try. Derek Sivers gave a really beautiful TED Talk, so listen for just about 2 minutes.
So ladies and gentlemen, at TED, we talk a lot about leadership and how to make a movement. So let's watch a movement happen, start to finish, in under 3 minutes and dissect some lessons from it. First, of course, you know, a leader needs the guts to stand out and be ridiculed. But what he's doing is so easy to follow. So here's his first follower with a crucial role. He's going to show everyone else how to follow. Now notice that the leader embraces him as an equal. So now it's not about the leader anymore, it's about them, plural. Now there he is calling to his friends. Now if you notice that the first follower is actually an underestimated form of leadership in itself. It takes guts to stand out like that. The first follower is what transforms a lone nut into a leader. And here comes a second follower. Now it's not a lone nut, it's not two nuts, 3 is a crowd, and a crowd is news. So a movement must be public. It's important to show not just the leader, but the followers, because you find that new followers emulate the followers, not the leader. Now here come 2 more people, and immediately after, 3 more people. Now we've got momentum. This is the tipping point. Now we've got a movement. So notice that as more people join in, it's less risky. So those that were sitting on the fence before now have no reason not to. They won't stand out, they won't be ridiculed, but they will be part of the in crowd if they hurry. So over the next minute, you'll see all of the those that prefer to stick with the crowd, because eventually they would be ridiculed for not joining in. And that's how you make a movement. But let's recap some lessons from this. So first, if you are the type, like the shirtless dancing guy, that is standing alone, remember the importance of nurturing your first few followers as equals. So it's clearly about the movement, not you. Okay, but we might have missed the real lesson here. The biggest lesson, if you noticed, did you catch it? Is that leadership is over-glorified. That yes, it was the shirtless guy was first, and he'll get all the credit, but it was really the first follower that transformed the lone nut into a leader. So as we're told that we should all be leaders, that would be really ineffective. If you really care about starting a movement, have the courage to follow and show others how to follow. And when you find a lone nut doing something great, have the guts to be the first one to stand up and join in. And what a perfect place to do that.
I love that that video, and I think it is a great representation of what I think about Agile, and I think it's difficult to summarize it. I'm pretty sure that my mom still doesn't understand what Agile is or what an Agilist is. But I think that that's something that I'm really grateful for, is that it's not easy to define. And I think it's a movement with durability, because so many things in tech and IT in the space of continuous improvement come and they go. And here we are 20 years later talking about agility. And what's even more amazing is that it's boundary spanning. It's in HR, it's personal agility, and there's business agility. We're talking about agility outside of IT. Harvard Business Review, it took them until 2017, but they formally acknowledge that it's a conversation to be having with executives and leaders. So I'm grateful that it's hard to summarize it, and I think it's lovely that it's had durability and sticking power. The downside of a movement is that it cannot be confined or constrained. And there are many leaders and many first followers in Agile. I think there are many movements within the movement of Agile. And there are many that would argue all of that it's too commercialized or too productized, or we've lost our way, or too esoteric. I mean, you can fill in the blanks. You might have some of those that exist for you as well. But I want to offer a proposition, or maybe a perspective, which is, what if we can't get it wrong? What if the Agile movement is exactly where it's supposed to be? What if this is exactly what the movement needs to look like right now? What if everything that we see is exactly the way it needs to be? And see, if everything were perfect, then the work would be done. But this is about continuous improvement. It's about evolution. I couldn't have imagined that we'd be talking about business agility from an Agile manifesto. And I think every time we see something that we want to critique, what if we turned it around and asked ourselves, what am I longing for? In 1999, the predominant way to have a facilitator or a coach even on your team was to hire one from the outside, or to have a professional facilitator come in. And as I look around, and as I looked around back then in 2011, as we were working on learning objectives, I thought, this is ridiculous. These are skills that we need in-house, on the ground, everywhere, pervasive. They're not just for somebody that you would hire from the outside. And I was longing for teams to have access to collective intelligence. So what if every time you see something that you'd like to critique or point out that it's missing, that it is actually a moment, an idea of big magic, and it's circling you, and it's looking for you to say, yes, I would like to do that. It's looking for the first lone nut, or maybe the first follower. And maybe it's a movement that you're being called to lead. You heard several of them in the opening keynotes today. Buckminster Fuller once said, you never change things by fighting the existing reality. to change something, build a new model that makes the old model obsolete. The reality of agility is it's not something to fight, it's something to embrace. So we are here. The question is, where are we going? And what is the intention that you want to set for yourself? Intention is everything. William Murray said, until one is committed, there is hesitancy and the chance to draw back always ineffectiveness concerning all acts of initiative and creation. There is one elementary truth, the ignorance of which kills countless ideas and splendid plans, that the moment when one definitely commits oneself, meaning you decide, then providence moves too, and all sorts of things occur that would have never otherwise occurred. Setting an intention is the most important work to do. So if we're all working towards the same thing, then let's be intentional about how we do it. So what kind of leader do you want to be? What's the intention that you want to claim and set and make that decision today? I would love to invite you, if you're in the Whova app, to go into the chat and just stake a claim. I am the kind of leader who, fill in the blank. And we can take a couple of questions. I think we're almost out of time with all of my technical difficulties. But I can't see the chat because I'm on Zoom. But is there anything coming in?
Yep. So inspire, intentional.
Great.
Helps people notice what's missing, wants others to succeed.
Nice.
Supportive, guide towards change.
Love it. Yeah, so I would just encourage everybody to, even if you don't want to put it into the chat, just make a claim. I am the kind of leader who. And we can either take questions or we can wrap up.
Sure. Folks, if you have any questions, we have just a minute, so we can entertain one question. Feel free to go and put it in our chat, Q&A chat. How can you be a leader who speaks truth to a power?
I love that. Yeah, I love that question. I think it's a great question. I think that there's an opportunity. Well, let me say this about that question. A lot of times I hear that question. I don't know what the intent is behind you asking, but I hear that question a lot when it's like you want to give feedback to somebody, to a leader or to somebody above you that just says, hey, you're getting in my way, or you're contributing to some of the problems. And I think one of the ways to engage in that is to think a little bit more about how can you engage in a dialogue with them. So I think speaking truth to power takes container building. I think it takes relationship building, and I think it takes an ability and willingness to be in a conversation where you're able to say what you see. You know, one of the things that I observed is, and then to also inquire about the other person. So a lot of times the barriers, the things that feel really difficult in in an organization aren't there just because somebody's trying to make it really difficult. So I think that helping people engage in the conversation and being able to ask questions, as well as to speak your truth about what's happening.
Thanks, Marsha. So Thank you so much, Marsha, for an awesome presentation. and sharing your journey with all of us. We all are inspired, and that was an awesome, awesome presentation. So we still have two questions. If you have, if you want, you can go through Whova app and answer those.
Okay, I'll do that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll log
Thank
back
you
in.
so-
All right,
Yeah.
thank you. Thanks, everybody. Have a great evening.
Yep. Just quickly, Marsha. I mean, we have two choices in here. I'm sorry, I'm interjecting. I apologize. You have two choices. You can either go to Whova app and answer those questions, and or if you have like 60 seconds, you can answer one question. So you will have to take care of
Sure.
only one question in Whova. Is that okay?
Sounds good. Yeah, that's fine.
Hi. Perfect. Anju, do you want to read
Okay.
the first question?
Sure.
Hi.
So the
Thank
next
you.
question is, what is your message to new Agilists? How can one start being agile?
I think so my Agile journey started with really doing a lot of self-awareness and self-work. The things that I wanted out of agility, that I wanted to be able to trust the team and hand things over to the team, required a lot of me becoming much more aware about why did I want to control what the team was doing? What made it so difficult for me to trust others? So I think it's a combination of all of the above. Find a really good coach that you can work with, that you can co-coach or co-lead with. I think do anything that will ask other people for feedback, notice things about yourself, write a journal. When you run across something that you find in the team, even the question about, how do I give feedback? How do I coach up? Or how do I tell somebody that they're getting in my way? Like finding a way to journal through that process. So much of what we want in agility as Agilists is it's just about the personal work, the things that I believe, the story that runs in my head that gets in my way of really truly being agile. So I think there's some easy access ways to upping your level of self-awareness, noticing how your emotions play a role in what you're doing or how you respond and act to people.
Thank you, Marsha. And thanks everyone for joining us. Please go look at our agenda for tomorrow. Hope you all join us for the big event tomorrow. Thanks,
Great.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Marsha.